Good afternoon to our viewers in the United States. Good evening to those of you joining us from Europe, and welcome to everyone, regardless of where you are on this globe, for being with us today. My name is Jeff Rathke. I'm the president of the American Institute for Contemporary German Studies at Johns Hopkins University. And I'm really delighted to be part of this session today. I will hand over in a moment to my senior fellow, Eric Langenbacher, who directs the Society, Culture, and Politics program at AICGS. But before we do, let me just say how pleased we are to offer this discussion about the changing religious landscape in Germany as part of our series on Germany 30 years after unification. We will hear more about that from especially from our honored guest, Rolf Schieder from the Humboldt University. And with that, let me hand it over to Eric Langenbacher and look forward to the conversation.
Thanks, Jeff. I am especially looking forward to today's event so that we don't have to talk about the election, the transition, the transatlantic relationship, and we can instead delve into another very important topic. I just wanted to reiterate what Jeff said. This is our fifth event this year in a series that is very generously supported by the Embassy of the Federal Republic of Germany here in Washington, D.C. And we are using the 30th anniversary of German unification as an opportunity to kind of think about a generation of change in various policy areas. So for instance, we previously had events on how the party system has evolved. We had an event on how LGBTQ plus rights has evolved over the decades, as well as looking at climate and environmental policy, among many others. So today we're going to delve into Germany's changing religious landscape, how it's evolved, how it's changed since reunification. And we're very pleased to welcome back Rolf Schieder, who's a professor emeritus of religious education at Humboldt University in Berlin, as well as a visiting professor at Shanghai International Studies University. He actually founded the Institut für Religion und Politik in Berlin, which is a think tank bringing together professors in a variety of disciplines like law, political science, religious studies, as well as theologians. He's the author of several books, such as Wie viel Religion verträgt Deutschland, as well as some issue briefs here at AICGS. And I should note that Professor Schieder is a non-resident fellow and has been a longtime collaborator of ours. So once Professor Schieder is finished presenting, we will move to question and answers. And the way that we're going to do it is please put your question into the little Q&A box at the bottom, and then I will read the questions off to Professor Schieder. So without further ado, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you for the invitation and hello from Berlin. Germany's changing religious landscape. Why did I choose the metaphor landscape? Well, the term landscape points to a larger culture in which the different religious denominations are embedded. So I will not just talk about the Catholics and the Protestants, the Jews and the Muslims, but also about how these religions had been and are perceived at the moment in different regions of Germany. And since Germany's religious landscape is so different from the religious landscape in the United States, let me make some preliminary remarks on this fundamental transatlantic difference. So the first difference concerns the question, who actually shapes the religious culture in a country? When we compare the United States and Germany, we have to keep in mind in the US, there was first a democracy, we the people, and then came the state, government second. In Germany, it was the other way around. There was first a state, and only much later there came a democracy. So Germans are used to a top-down approach. So Germans just expect that the state takes care of everything: healthcare, social security, education, science, and also religion. Critics have called this attitude Deutsche Staatsfrömmigkeit, German piety towards the state. But maybe the fairly low numbers of COVID infections in Germany might also be due to the fact that Germans just like to obey and like to follow the rules. Although there's a small number of so-called Querdenker, they spread conspiracy theories, they hate science, they're anti-elitist and don't see the rule of law as a form of freedom, but as something they have to fight against. But this is a very, very small number, and they are really considered as radicals. This influence of the state in Europe on everything was already detected by French philosopher Michel Foucault, and he called this growing influence of the state on everyday life, but also on religions, the growing pastoral power of the state in the 18th century. So while Mother Church cared for the people in medieval times, Father State took over in the 18th and 19th and also 20th century. The second difference between the US and Germany is the following. The metaphor landscape also refers to another specific feature of religion in Germany, which is the so-called Territorialprinzip, the principle of a territory. So while in the United States, a congregation, a religious congregation, is just the number of people who actually meet in a house of worship regularly, in Germany, a religious congregation is organized similar to a municipality. So if you like, you can say there is no spot on German soil which is not under some sort of spiritual rule, so where some diocese or some Landeskirche is responsible for. So a congregation is responsible for a certain territory. So this means a congregation does not consist of people who meet regularly, but it consists of people who live in a certain neighborhood. So only about 5% of Protestants and about 8% of Catholics attend religious services regularly, but they still identify with their church because it is the church building in their neighborhood. Sociologists have called this attitude in Europe and in Germany belonging without believing. But this is not quite correct because many Protestants feel that the church is important, but they also want to keep their distance because the going to church is not meeting business friends, is not meeting people who are important for your life, but it's just the church in your neighborhood. And you might not be interested in meeting the people who are at the moment active there. But still, there are many people who think that the church is important, does a lot of important social work, and it's also important just in case you need it. But of course, there is a growing trend which can be called believing without belonging. This trend indeed is a threat to the religious landscape as we know it actually since 1815, when the Catholic and Protestant territories were designed in the Vienna Congress. So talking about the religious landscape in Germany in 1990 is inevitably talking about the influence of the politics of the state on religion. So what did the West German and what did the East German governments do to its religions? Let's first have a look at East Germany. In 1950, 90% of the population in the East belonged to one of the Protestant Landeskirchen. By 1990, the number was down to 20%. What happened? Socialists and Christians considered each other as ideological enemies, and so socialists did everything to exclude the churches from the public sphere. Religious education in public schools was forbidden, and the materialistic worldview was the only one accepted. Christianity survived, also with a lot of support from the West. And since the socialists did not dare to destroy the territorial structure of the church, although the number of church members became less and less, the churches became in the 80s sanctuaries for political dissenters. 1989 was called a revolution of the candles, since the churches had been pockets of resistance against the less and less convincing authoritarian socialist rule. And many pastors and pastors' children went into politics, most visibly Joachim Gauck and Angela Merkel. But the overwhelming majority of East Germany didn't really know what religion is good for. It was a non-issue for so many decades, and nowhere the socialist rulers had been more successful than in erasing religious traditions. Materialism was the ideology taught in schools, and this teaching was highly successful. When a young girl, after the fall of the wall, an East German girl, was asked, "Are you religious?" her answer was, "No, I am normal." In 1990, 80% of the population didn't miss religion and couldn't care less about God. There was no religious vacuum, as some mega church leaders in the West and even in the US had hoped for. Willow Creek, for instance, tried to missionize East Germany, but they failed. No one missed religion. The finite was fine, and who needed the infinite? Materialism was enough, was good enough, especially when you have enough material to consume. So it was not just the socialist rule. The churches also had lost context to the working classes already in the middle of the 19th century, and so religion became more and more a middle class thing, and it was something for the elites. So there was no desire to become member of a Landeskirche again when religious life was free to choose in the East. Church membership in the East remains low till today. On average, there are about 20% church members in the East. But there was an astounding development over the past 30 years anyway. So when you drive through East Germany, there is no village and no city in the East which has not restored its church buildings. Many East Germans who never went to church donated to rebuild their church buildings, these often very old and picturesque churches, because they represented the identity of the community. And the church buildings with the graveyards around also represented the history of the families. So these buildings became the symbol of one's family religion and of the village's civil religions. So people like to go to the church for special occasions like anniversaries, funerals, sometimes on Christmas, but not on a regular basis. So in a way, you can say there is people don't hate religion in the East, but they just keep their distance, and nothing really has changed here. How was and is the situation in West Germany? Actually, there is no separation of church and state in Germany. On the contrary, the state in the West had been highly supportive of the churches, particularly towards the two big church bodies, the Catholic and the Protestant world. There was always a close cooperation. First, in the field of social services, the churches ran hospitals, adult homes, kindergartens. They cared for the needy and the poor. At the moment, the Catholic and the Protestant churches have more employees in the field of social services than any other organization in the country. And there's another highly influential field of close cooperation. This is the field of education. When you look at the first 20 articles of the German Constitution, they are about basic human rights. Article 4 guarantees freedom of religion, and Article 7 guarantees religious education in public schools in close cooperation with the churches or any other religious organization. So religious education is the only school subject which is guaranteed by the Constitution. So for young boys and girls in the West, religion was normal. They made an encounter with it twice every week in school. But in a way, West Germans' adherence to religion and the church was quite similar to the distance of the East Germans, because in both cases, it was just a self-understood habit to support religion because the majority and the authority of the state supported it, or in the East was against it. My fourth point, what actually happened during unification? And I would argue the unification of East and West was actually a colonization of the East by the West, particularly in the field of religion. Since the old GDR adopted the Grundgesetz, they also adopted the laws concerning religion, confessional religious education in public schools, confessional theological faculties, pastoral care in the army. The paradox was that while the majority in the East just didn't care, the Christian minority opposed this new cooperation between state and church strongly. So it was had been particularly the Christians in the East who didn't like the West German system of heavy cooperation between church and state. So the East German Christians felt that their distance and their resistance towards the state was the right thing to do, also in the future, be it a socialist or be it a democratic state. So the state was considered as a threat, as you can learn from the apocalyptic literature in the Bible. And also in the East, religious education took place in the congregations, and there was a real concern that religious education in public schools might ruin this tradition. It didn't, but the interesting thing here is that confessing Christians and confessing socialists both opposed this Western model of cooperation between church and state. So who has succeeded? The colonizers or the indigenous people in the GDR? Next time when you come to Berlin, take a look at the rebuilt Stadtschloss, the so-called Humboldt Forum, which replaced the much beloved Palast der Republik. On top of the cupola of the new Schloss, you will see a huge cross. And around the base of the cupola, you can read 2 Bible verses which ask everybody to bend their knees in front of Jesus. Yes, there was some protest in the newspapers, but this monumental theology, of course, will survive. And what must have been even more bitter for the East Germans, and particularly the confessing Marxists, they replaced also the Marx-Engels Memorial close to the Rote Rathaus. In the GDR times, Marx and Engels looked to the East, from where they expected further inspiration. Now they removed them and turned them around, and they now look to the West, from where capitalism conquered the country. About 200 meters south of the Marx-Engels monument, a quite unique religious site is under construction, and all this in former East Germany. It is called House of One and is going to be built on the ruins of the old St. Peter's Church. This House of One will be run by Protestants, Muslims, and Jews. It has 3 prayer rooms, and in the middle a forum where all three monotheistic religions can meet for public discourse. The mayor of Berlin is quite proud about this project and claims that Berlin is no more the capital of atheism, as Peter L. Berger called Berlin, but the capital of religious diversity. And here we are at the role which Islam plays at the moment in Germany. The most visible change in the religious landscape of Germany is the arrival of Islam. East Germany didn't have any Muslims. Till today, you will find Muslims in West Berlin in large numbers, but hardly any in East Berlin. There are about 5 million Muslims in Germany. The majority of them comes from Turkey. But we have to be aware that a significant change in discourse happened after 9/11. Before 9/11, we had, the media said, 4 million Turks, Lebanese, Syrians, etc. After 9/11, they all were called Muslims, although the majority of them is not confessing and keeps as much distance to a mosque as Christians keep distance to their churches. But by being identified as religious now, they appear stranger than before. The young generation of Muslims seems to be very proud of their religion. When they get into an argument with German kids in the schoolyards, you can hear arguments like, "Oh, you Germans, you don't love your country, you don't have family values, and you have no religion." The German kids are quite helpless then, and they don't know what to say. But also in all the polls about the faith of the youth in Germany, it's always very clear the Muslim minority has a much stronger idea of how religion influences their everyday life than the Catholics, the Protestants, and also, of course, the non-affiliated. The visibility of Islam is a big problem. When the biggest mosque in Germany was opened in Cologne in 2018, I guess the organizers made the mistake to invite Erdogan to talk at the opening. But many Germans don't like the idea that Erdogan influences politics in Germany, and in a way, he extends his power on German soil. But also Saudi Arabia invests a lot of money supporting mosques in Germany, and Germans feel quite awkward about this. On the other hand, Germany invests a lot of money in order to integrate Islam. So they offer now Islamic religious education in public schools, according to Article 7 of the Basic Law of the Constitution. They open Islamic faculties, even here in Berlin, they opened one. There is some hope on the side of the politicians that some kind of Euro-Islam or Enlightenment Islam might develop by including Islamic religion in the system of education in Germany. Another visible sign of the presence of Islam is the headscarf of Muslim women. The big debate is it a flag of Islamism and should be banned? Or is it an expression of religious freedom and should be respected and tolerated? Germany is deeply divided. Those who welcome diversity argue that it is less important what is on the head than what is in the head. And they would say that a headscarf is a matter of taste and not of ideology. And there are others who believe that this is an assault to women's rights and to Western values. The Supreme Court, until now, defends the individual's right to live one's religion also in public spaces like schools, unless there's a threat to public life and order. But those who oppose the headscarf in schools have a powerful lobby as well, and we do not quite know how this dispute will end. For the majority of German Länder, there is a hope for let's say, civilizing religion through education. And actually, a well-educated religious body was a very successful strategy in Germany to overcome the confessional divide between Catholics and Protestants. So in Germany, no religious leader in the churches has not gone through a thorough university training. So in a way, education is considered as a vaccine against the virus of fundamentalism. And it's true, in Germany we have no debates on creationism. There are no apocalyptic debates on who is the Antichrist and in what kind of time of tribulation do we live, and also Armageddon is on nobody's mind. My last point, from confessional belonging to a search for inspiration. There is also a downside to these well-educated, mainstreamed, well-adapted church people, because many church members ask, what actually is the unique selling product of the churches? The churches are so much part of public culture that many people feel that they might get along as well without the churches. And so the number of those who think they can save their church taxes is rising and rising. In 1990, you could roughly say that 1/3 of Germans is Catholic, 1/3 is Protestant, and 1/3 is unaffiliated, plus 100,000 Jews, 3 million Muslims. In 2020, you have only 25% Catholics, 25% Protestants, about the same number of Jews, 5 million Muslims, 3 million more, and about 40% of unaffiliated. These unaffiliated are properly called nuns because only 0.5% of Germans are organized atheists or agnostics. But the number of these nuns will grow. The two big established churches expect that they will lose about 30% of their members till 2050. This would not only be a big loss for the churches, this would also mean that the traditional cooperation between church and state will come under enormous stress. Because why should the taxpayer invest so much money in religious organizations if they only represent a minority of the population? The bishops and the church leaders don't make the impression that they have any idea how to change the game. It just looks like the confessional age is gone and new forms of religion will emerge. One could call this coming age the age of search for inspiration. I had the following encounter with a young student of theology when I was teaching. She wanted to become a pastor, and she told me that she makes some money by playing the organ at Lutheran services on Sunday morning. But since this experience is spiritually so empty for her, she also attends in the afternoon the services of Hillsong Berlin. Hillsong is a charismatic network, was founded in Australia, and now they are growing all over the big cities in Europe. It is, from my point of view, theologically shallow, but highly successful among young people who want to make some inspiring experiences when they go to church, which you cannot make in the normal services of our mainline churches. But there is not just this new search for inspiration by the young people. There's also a more concerning development going on, which I would like to call the rise of the global religious right. The so-called Querdenker, about whom I talked, they are very much, or the people who attend these demonstrations, they are very much organized by the AfD. But there was a couple of days ago in the Spiegel an interesting article by a political scientist who said, but why do so many people come from the area of Stuttgart and from the area of Dresden. And actually, in the Schwäbische Alb, in the Swabian area, we have a very strong pietistic movement. And also in the Erzgebirge, close to Dresden, we have a very strong, very conservative group of Christians who, as it looks, also have some sympathies for the AfD. So it looks like there is a growing religious right also in Germany. And when you look at the religious right globally, you can see Steve Bannon travel through Europe, meet Marine Le Pen, Beatrix von Storch from the AfD. They all meet in Moscow when the Russian Orthodox Church pushes for more family values in the West. So maybe the religious right might be a problem also for Germany, although in the old days we had the impression that a good religious education is quite helpful against these extremist movements. But nobody knows, and we are all excited how the future of religion will turn out. Thank you for listening to me, and I'm looking forward to your questions.
All right, thank you so much. So as I mentioned, please, to all of our attendees, type your questions into the Q&A box, and then I will select and read them off to Professor Schieder. So thank you so much, Rolf, for a very, I think, insightful overview of a lot that has been going on in Germany. So the first question from Tom Lancaster has to do with your reference to the Constitutional Court. I think it was that you meant. And what role has the Constitutional Court played in a lot of these developments that you're talking about? I guess especially from the kind of the public policy angle. I think you're muted.
I have to. Thank you. Yeah. I mean, it's interesting when you look at our, well, we also call it Supreme Court, but you're right, you call it Constitutional Court, the Bundesverfassungsgericht, yeah. So they, in 1994, they had a very fascinating ruling on the cross in public buildings, the so-called Kruzifixurteil. And there it looked like our Constitutional Court is becoming more and more anti-religious. But actually, this wasn't true, because when you looked at the rulings in the 21st century, they were very, very eager to be fair towards all the other religions which are in the country, and they felt the cross is an identification of the state with the Christian tradition, which is not good for religious diversity. So when it came to the headscarf, we had two rulings actually. One, I think in 2004, where it sounded like teachers and judges are not allowed to wear a headscarf because this is against the neutrality of the state. But in 2015, there was a second ruling of the Constitutional Court in Karlsruhe. And there they said, if we want to have religious plurality in the country, then this plurality should also be visible at schools. And only in the case of conflict, the school has the right to ask a teacher to take off her headscarf. But until then, if there is no complaint, she can wear it. And to my impression, many people don't care so much about the headscarf. So I don't know how it will develop, but it seems to me like younger people have less problems with the headscarf than older ones.
All right, I'm going to kind of combine and maybe interpret some of the questions here. And so I guess the way that I would put the question is that like in other countries, but also in Germany, there seems to be a lot of anxiety around Islam in particular. You know, sometimes it's about the way mosques will look, minaret height and stuff like that. Sometimes it's, you know, concerns about, how compatible the religion is with the Grundgesetz. But why do you think that it's Islam in particular that seems to cause so many of these anxieties? You're muted again.
Uh, when you read the book of Thilo Sarrazin, which was published in 2011, I guess, the term, the title is Deutschland schafft sich ab. So means Germany is taking itself down. And when you read it, it's actually an apocalyptic book. So it starts out with saying, in 50 years, the Kölner Dom and all the big Christian cathedrals will be Muslim. But the real anxiety Sarrazin has is that German women just will have less children than the Muslim women. So the anxiety, I call this anxiety towards Islam a phantasma. The term phantasma was coined by Jacques Lacan. He's a French psychoanalyst, and he says, a phantasma is actually something which I fear because I envy those people who have something which I don't have. So if you like, if you look at the young, as I said, when you talk to young Muslims, they believe in their beliefs. They stick very much to their tradition, which German kids, they are not so much interested. Of course, family values are very highly valued. So in a way, these Muslim kids behave like migrant families everywhere. They are very eager and very strong to make a success. And through this, of course, I think Germany feels like we are weak, we are not powerful enough. These Muslims, they are manly, they are strong, they want to fight. And look at all our German boys and kids and girls. They just, don't care at all. So in a way, there's a funny mix of envy and fear.
Very interesting. All right, so lots of questions are coming in. Here's an interesting one. You had mentioned that there seems to be a surge of folks in the Erzgebirge region in Eastern Germany regarding the religious right. Why do you think that that's the case? And is it really just the Erzgebirge, or are there other parts of Eastern Germany that are seeing a similar kind of resurgence?
Yeah, I just mentioned that article, but I don't really agree to that article. But what I've found interesting that a political scientist says, oh, there are two Bible belts in Germany, in the southwest and in the northeast, and this might also play a role why people are so anti-science, so anti-elite, and so on. But of course, it's not just these Christians, and but what is interesting about these movements of Querdenker is that obviously the AfD is able to be in good context to some religious groups. To some conservative religious groups. And the next interesting thing about the Erzgebirge is, of course, because it's East Germany. When you look, where has the AfD the most success? It's in the East. And the funny thing is, the churches are withdrawing from the countryside. The communities are moving out because there are less and less people. And the AfD erects their AfD bureaus, and we care for you. So the AfD success in the East is no one cares for you, but we do. So we are anti-elitist. We are against government. If you, I mean, to be honest, you know, when I look at the strategies of the AfD and the right wing, the religious right in Germany, you feel like they have learned a lot from the United States at this point, you know, to be anti-government and say, we are the real revolutionaries and we have to save the slogan from the 90s, we are the people. This is how they, you know, how they convince people that they are not the right ones, you know, that they're not on the right, but they are actually the progressives, and the future is theirs.
So just out of curiosity, is there any hard data on whether more religious Germans are supporting the AfD? Or, you know, I mean, what actually are their preferences? I mean, we know that Catholics used to be a core constituency, or are a core constituency of the CDU and especially the CSU. But are any of those relationships changing? And in particular, where does support for the AfD come in?
Yeah, there are not so many data. There is a group of Christians in the AfD. This group is shrinking, actually. And within the AfD, as you know, there are many Flügel, they call it. You know, there are many wings, and of course, the right wingers, you know, cannot cooperate with the Christians. Also, but this is also interesting. What you also have in the East, you have a growing number of Germanic nativists. So they say, look, we Germans got missionized. And missionized by some Jewish terrible ideology, which they call Christianity, but the religion of our forefathers was the Germanic faith. And so especially the music groups which support these right-wing movements, they have a lot of old Germanic mythologies there. But again, I mean, these guys have nothing to do with a small group of Christians within the AfD. But I think it's not so much the active people within the AfD where you have a lot of Christians there. Although I named Beatrix von Storch, they try to reach out to the evangelical constituency, but the bigger problem is that many people in the East who have to cast their ballots feel like, yes, we are protesting and we do not want to go along with what the elites tell us, and we are very critical of the media. So there is a potential voters. There's a mentality, you know, which supports the AfD.
All right. So you mentioned the Jewish community in passing, that there's approximately 100,000 Jewish people in Germany today. But maybe you could share a few more thoughts on, you know, what's going on with that community and how people expect it to evolve in the coming years and decades.
Well, here in Berlin, it's quite fascinating how many young people from Israel come and visit and want to live here. So it looks like also the gay communities from Tel Aviv and from Berlin are in close contacts, and that's very lovely and very lively. At the same time, all the synagogues in Berlin need police men being stationed there in order to protect the Islamic the Jewish synagogues. We had a very interesting moment here in Germany when there was a big movement against the circumcision of children. So we had many left-wing people who said the circumcision of boys should be banned in Germany. And it was first directed against Muslim circumcision, but of course, if it would have become law, it would also have been a move against against Jewish life in Germany. And I think this is really very important, that the German government has a very, very strong feeling of protecting Jewish life in Germany. They feel like this is, this is almost a civil religious obligation that Germany has to protect the Jews. And this is why, in the end, this very strong movement of banning circumcision in the end failed, because Angela Merkel and some very smart lawyers, they made a rule that parents have the right to continue circumcision, and it's not against the rights of children, which those who wanted to get this ban argued. So I feel the government is very much in favor of Jewish life in Germany, but you still have many anti-Semitic undertow feelings, if you like. Let me make one final remark here. Many people in Germany think that it's particularly the Muslim community which is highly anti-Semitic, but there are some colleagues who did in-depth interviews with Muslim children, also with Muslim children who were taken to Auschwitz, because there is a school program that school kids should visit Auschwitz. And it turned out that the Muslim children didn't have stronger anti-Semitic feelings than the other kids, but they were in a way scared when they saw what happened in Auschwitz, because they felt like, oh my God, what are these Germans able to do to us in case, as a minority? So this whole, I just want to point out, a big majority of Germans is very happy that Jewish life is back, and there are still some who don't like it and who don't dare to speak up. But as we saw in Halle, they don't have to speak in order to show their dismay about it.
So I would like to ask a grander, perhaps more speculative question. Again, interpreting some of the questions that we're getting here. So what do you think? So Germany is a largely secularized country today, as you put it, belonging without believing, but the role of faith is much less than it was previously. What do you think are some of the potential consequences of this kind of like whole-scale secularization? In particular, do you think the Germans might be attracted to other kind of belief-like movements? Veganism, for instance, was something that was mentioned. And I was also thinking about this because, as you know, conspiracy theorizing, you mentioned the Querdenker. There's also QAnon in the United States. And I read somewhere that Germany has the second most QAnon believers than, next to the United States in the entire world. So do you think that the loss of faith is making Germans, like, maybe one of the downsides is that they're more prone to conspiracy theorizing or other things?
I think the group who might go down that road is small. I think. Maybe this is because I'm a professor at the university. I believe very much in a very thorough, well-organized educational system in Germany. So if you would say, okay, what kind of quasi-religions are very popular in Germany, you can say saving the planet. I mean, you know, the green movement started in the 80s in Germany. They even called themselves in the beginning fundamentalists, you know, then they became realists later. But also when you look at this Greta Thunberg movement and so on, the idea that the planet is a real saving the planet is a real pressing issue. I would say this will become much stronger, and it will have a huge impact on everything. There's an interesting complaint by the right-wing media. They said, look, what Greta does with environmentalism, we did by pointing out what a threat the Muslim world is to Europe. But Greta gets invited to the Pope. She is allowed to speak at the United Nations. And what are we? We are just, you know, we are called apocalypticists and Islamophobics, although we think the threat we point to is as strong as the one Greta Thunberg points to. But I would say, yes, environmentalism is a big issue. And also Germans just love social security, but also social equality. So in a way, the whole question, you know, Germans are debating about Grundeinkommen für alle, and you know, all these sharing models is very popular among the younger people. So I wouldn't see a radicalization, but indeed very much a focusing on you know, the visible things, whereas the idea of God and might be, well, you know, when you take the term secularization properly, it just means that what was formerly religious now has entered the worldly sphere. And indeed, I mean, this is, you know, this is what you do. You with religious fervor, you fight for nature and well, and in Germany they don't call it nature, they call it creation, which is again religious term actually.
That kind of flows right into my next question. So you talked a bit about the global religious right. We talked about the AfD, but what about a religious left in Germany? You know, I've always thought that, especially when you look at Christian theology, there certainly is a very kind of social justice, progressive, maybe even leftist interpretation in there. I had a roommate in Berlin once who was a committed communist, but went to his evangelical church every Sunday, and he definitely saw a connection there. So is there a religious left, and if not, why?
Well, I mean, since I was teaching for 20 years students of theology, I felt they all were quite well. They either voted for the Green Party, or for the Social Democrats. There was hardly anyone voting for the CDU. One highly radicalizing thing is gender equality, of course. So our students, and also you have to be aware, the majority of theology students are now female. So and this gender issue is a very, very big one. And let me a little bit ironic. I mean, maybe even the Ratsvorsitzende of the EKD, the Bishop of Bavaria, I mean, he has so many left-wing, or at least social democratic ideas. Also the idea that the Protestant church now is running a ship in the Mediterranean Sea in order to pick up refugees from Africa shows that the regular church is quite political, which again feeds into the idea that for many the church is too left-wing. There was a joke that at some point in the 90s, when the board of members of the EKD, Evangelische Kirche in Deutschland, met, they also could have made a SPD meeting there because they all had been members of the SPD. So I would say the Protestant Church is quite open to left, not radical left, but to quite leftist themes.
All right, well, we are rapidly running out of time. And so there's just a couple of various and sundry points. First, this notion of phantasma that you mentioned before, who was the thinker associated with that? I think you said that the thinker was French.
The name is Jacques Lacan, L-A-C-A-N, Jacques Lacan. And there's also an article by me, I think it's even translated into English, when you go to Rolf Schieder, Der Spiegel, so this, the magazine Der Spiegel, there I wrote after the massacre in Utøya in Norway. I wrote an article on this, how right-wing thinking and Islamic thinking actually coincide. And there I explained this theory of Islam as a phantasma a little bit longer. Maybe you can look it up there.
Excellent. And then I guess our final question. So you mentioned theology students just now, and that a majority of theology students are now female. But overall, like, what are student numbers like in theological faculties, in seminaries, et cetera? I know that the Catholic Church has had quite an issue. And I think that one of the statistical agencies actually shows or publishes the number of priests being trained or each year, which has really kind of plummeted. But what are the overall numbers like?
Well, they're not so bad for the Protestant Church because we allow women to become pastors, and this is our big advantage. At Humboldt University, we never had less than 1,000 students per semester. But these 1,000 students, they differentiate in 1/3 who wanted to become pastors in a parish, 1/3 who became teachers in public schools, and we had another area of studies which we called a Master of Religion and Culture. There we had students from China, from Turkey, from Iran, from wherever, people who were just interested in the religious culture in Germany, and they get a master's degree afterwards. They had been a very inspiring group actually for our faculties. What we are discussing at the moment in Berlin, that we want to found a faculty of theologies where the Catholics, the Muslims, the Jews, and the Protestants together offer courses, because then, this would improve just the quality of our future religious personnel quite a lot.
All right, well, we're coming right up to the hour. I just want to thank you deeply for, really one of the most engaging discussions that, I've had, not just about religion in Germany, but the nature of German religious culture, the landscape, as you put it. I just thought it was, terrific and very, very, very enlightening. So thank you, Professor Schieder. And, hopefully we can convince you to also write something for our advisor, put on our website, because I think that there's a lot of interest, especially in the United States, about this issue. So thank you very much. And we will now conclude today's
Thank you for
event.
listening to me. Bye-bye.